I didn't know my marriage would start falling apart over grilled burgers and cheap beer. It was supposed to be one of those harmless suburban weekends, the kind where neighbors drift in and out of our backyard, plastic cups in hand, pretending we all liked each other more than we actually did. The sun was warm, the grill was smoking, and laughter floated easily through the air. On the surface, everything looked normal. 8 years of marriage, a quiet street, a stable life. That's what everyone saw. What they didn't see was the moment my husband decided to humiliate me, publicly, casually, and without a second thought. I was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, grease popping against the metal, when I heard my name drift across the yard. At first, I didn't react. Neighbors talk. People joke. That's normal. Then his voice cut through the noise. Loud. Careless. Amused. Seriously, he said, wine glass in hand, already flushed from drinking. Who wants to trade spouses? Mine's low maintenance and has absolutely zero ambition. The backyard went dead silent. No laughter. No awkward chuckles. Just that sharp, suffocating pause where everyone realizes something just crossed a line. I felt it before I saw it. The weight of eyes turning toward me. Men suddenly fascinated by the grass. Women whispering behind their hands. That tight pressure in my chest that comes when humiliation lands before your mind can catch up. My husband was smiling. He thought it was funny. And then Karen, the recently divorced neighbor 3 houses down, stepped forward with a slow smile that made my stomach drop. "I'll take her," she said lightly. "When should I pick her up?" That's when my husband's expression changed. Shock, panic, calculation. Because suddenly, the joke wasn't under his control anymore. I set the spatula down, slowly, deliberately. I walked toward them, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Well," I said calmly, though my hands were shaking, "I really appreciate you marketing me like this. Should I start packing now, or do you want to help load the truck?" The words landed harder than I expected. His face went pale. "It was just a joke," he stammered. "Was it?" Because the entire neighborhood was watching. And for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't laughing along to protect his comfort. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. My husband didn't just disrespect me. He was already comfortable doing it in front of witnesses. And once that line is crossed, nothing is ever the same again. I'm 35 years old, and if you met me at a glance, you'd probably describe me with the kind of words people use when they don't know what else to say. Nice. Calm. Easy to get along with. I used to take those words as compliments. Now I hear them differently, like warnings, like labels that translate into, "She'll tolerate more than she should." My name is Emily, and for 8 years, I was married to Mark. We lived in a typical suburban neighborhood where lawns were trimmed like a competition, and everyone's porch lights turned on at exactly the same time. The kind of place where people waved too brightly and asked questions that sounded friendly but felt like audits. "Everything good? How's work? Still no kids yet?" I learned to smile through all of it, because that's what you do in a neighborhood like ours. You don't crack. You don't make scenes. You don't let people see what's happening behind your curtains. And for a long time, Mark and I looked like one of the good couples. We weren't the loud kind of happy. We weren't the Instagram perfect kind either. We were steady, predictable, safe, or at least that's what I told myself. Mark and I met the way a lot of adults meet when life isn't romantic anymore, through routine. A mutual friend invited us to a casual game night. I remember walking into that living room, holding a store-bought veggie tray, feeling awkward, trying to look like I belonged. Mark was the guy who offered to take it from my hands before I could even find a place to set it down. "Let me," he said easily. "Those things are always heavier than they look." He had that approachable kind of charm, not flashy, not intense, just comfortable, like a well-worn sweatshirt. He made people laugh without trying too hard. He listened when you talked. He didn't dominate the room. After the night ended, he walked me to my car. "Text me when you get home," he said, like he meant it. And I remember thinking, oh, this is what grown-up love looks like. For a while, it was. We dated for 2 years before we got married. We moved in together after the first year, into a small rental that smelled like fresh paint and cheap carpet. We didn't have much then. No expensive vacations, no fancy furniture. But we had a rhythm. Mark worked, I worked, we cooked dinner together most nights, we watched bad TV, we laughed at dumb things. When he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. Just Mark, nervous hands, a small velvet box, and that quiet sincerity in his eyes. I don't want a dramatic life, he told me. I want a real one, with you. I cried when he said it, actual tears, because I believed him. And maybe he believed it too, at the time. The first few years of marriage felt normal, in the best way. We had our little traditions, Friday takeout, Sunday morning coffee, neighborhood walks where we'd point out houses we liked and pretend we were the kind of people who renovated kitchens for fun. We bought our home after year 3. It wasn't huge, middle class, comfortable, a backyard big enough for a grill and a patio table, the exact kind of yard where people hosted barbecues. Mark seemed proud that we'd made it, but pride has a way of curdling when it sits next to resentment. I didn't notice it at first. Or maybe I did, but I explained it away the way women are trained to. Mark would make small comments that sounded like jokes if you didn't look too closely. If you really wanted more, you'd push harder, he'd say one night while scrolling on his phone. Or, some people don't settle for this. He never said you're not enough outright. He didn't have to. It lived in the tone, the sighs, the way his eyes would flick around our house like it was something he was tolerating, not choosing. And the thing is, I wasn't lazy. I wasn't aimless. I worked a steady job. I contributed. I kept our life running. I paid my share. I handled the invisible labor most people don't even notice until it's gone. Groceries, appointments, bills, planning, remembering. But Mark didn't praise steady. Mark praised more. More money, more status, more ambition, whatever that meant in his head. At first, I told myself he was just stressed. Then I told myself it was a phase. Then I told myself it didn't matter, because at the end of the day, he still came home to me. Until I started realizing that coming home wasn't the same as choosing me. His family didn't help. Mark's parents were the kind of people who measured worth with a ruler made of achievement. They weren't cruel in obvious ways. They were worse, polite, subtle, and confident they were right. His mom would smile too sweetly and ask questions that weren't really questions. "So, any plans to move up soon?" she'd ask, looking at me like my answer was supposed to impress her. Or his dad would clap Mark on the back and say things like, "You've got a good woman, keeps things stable while you chase bigger things." Like I was part of the furniture, useful, quiet, not meant to shine. I tried. I really did. I showed up to dinners. I smiled. I brought desserts. I laughed at jokes that made me feel small. I learned how to swallow discomfort so smoothly, no one could tell I was choking on it. And Mark never corrected them. He never said, "Actually, Emily works hard." He never said, "Emily matters." He just let it happen, like he agreed. There were other signs too, small, sharp moments that I brushed off because the alternative, admitting what they meant, felt too heavy. The eye rolls when I talked too long. The way he'd cut me off mid-sentence. How he'd turn my opinions into punchlines around friends. And then there was the drinking. Mark wasn't an alcoholic. He didn't drink every day. That's what made it easier to ignore. But at gatherings, barbecues, parties, nights when people were watching, he'd drink just enough to get loud, just enough to get bold. Like alcohol gave him permission to say things he normally kept behind his teeth. And I would tell myself, he didn't mean it. He was tipsy. He's just joking. I said that for years, until last Saturday, until the backyard full of neighbors went silent, until my husband stood there with a smug grin and tried to trade me like I was something cheap, something disposable. And in that moment, with everyone watching, I realized maybe it hadn't been a phase. Maybe this was who he'd been becoming all along. Maybe I'd just been the last one to admit it. Looking back now, it's almost embarrassing how hard I worked to not see the cracks. They didn't appear overnight. They crept in slowly, quietly, disguised as normal marital friction, the kind everyone says is inevitable if you stay together long enough. Mark didn't suddenly wake up one day and decide I wasn't enough. He drifted there, step by step, while I stood still, convincing myself that love meant patience. The first real shift came around our 5th year of marriage. That was when his dissatisfaction started turning outward. He'd come home from work tense, jaw tight, movements sharp. At dinner, he'd scroll through his phone, pausing on photos of people we barely knew. Former classmates, coworkers, friends of friends. "See this?" he'd say, turning the screen toward me. "They just bought a lake house." I'd nod, unsure what response he wanted. "Good for them," I'd say carefully. He'd sigh. "Must be nice." At first, I tried to engage the conversation in good faith. "Everyone moves at their own pace," I'd say. "We're doing okay." That word, okay, started to irritate him. "Okay isn't the goal," he snapped once. "Comfortable isn't the goal." I remember blinking at him, surprised by the edge in his voice. "Isn't it?" I asked. "I thought the goal was being happy." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's such a small way to think." That was the first time I felt something inside me shrink. After that, the comments became more frequent and more pointed. He started correcting me in front of people. If I told a story, he'd interrupt. "That's not exactly how it happened," he'd say, smiling like he was doing me a favor. If I expressed an opinion, he'd smirk. "Well, you would think that." Around friends, he'd frame his criticisms as jokes. "Emily keeps me grounded," he'd say, sometimes a little too grounded. People laughed. I forced myself to laugh too. Because what was I supposed to do? Call him out? Make it awkward? So I swallowed it. At home, I tried to talk to him. "Does it bother you when you say things like that?" I asked one night, lying beside him in bed. He didn't look away from his phone. "You're too sensitive," he said. "You know I'm joking." That phrase, "you're too sensitive," became his shield. Anytime I expressed discomfort, he used it to flip the problem back onto me. I learned quickly that bringing things up only led to one of two outcomes. He'd minimize it, or he'd get annoyed. Neither felt worth the emotional cost. Meanwhile, his family's influence grew heavier. His mother would comment on my career like it was a hobby. "So you're still doing that?" she asked once over dinner. "Mark's job is really demanding, you know. He carries a lot." I carried plenty too, just not in ways they valued. Mark never defended me. Instead, he'd nod along, like he agreed I was an accessory to his real life. Then came Karen. She moved into the neighborhood after her divorce. Everyone knew the story, or at least the version people whispered over fences. Her husband had left her for a younger woman. It was messy, public, painful. People treated her like a cautionary tale. "She's been through a lot," they'd say, lowering their voices. "Poor thing." Karen didn't act like someone who needed pity. She was direct, confident, unapologetically herself. The first time I talked to her was at a block meeting. We ended up sitting next to each other, trading small talk about trash schedules and parking complaints. "You okay?" she asked me quietly at one point, glancing toward Mark across the room. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "You just looked tired." No one had said that to me out loud before. I smiled it off. "I'm fine." She studied me for a second, like she didn't believe me. But she didn't push. From then on, she'd wave when she saw me, ask how I was doing. Small things, Mark noticed. "You and Karen are getting friendly," he said once, tone casual but eyes sharp. "She's nice," I replied. He snorted. "She's bored." Something about that rubbed me the wrong way. "She went through a lot," I said. "So," he replied, "doesn't mean she needs to insert herself into everyone else's life." That was the first time I realized something else was happening. Mark didn't like Karen. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she saw too much. As months passed, his behavior around neighbors grew bolder. He'd tease me openly. "Emily's the responsible one," he'd say. I'd be lost without her spreadsheets. Again, laughter. Again, that tight feeling in my chest. At barbecues, he drank more. Alcohol loosened whatever filter he still had. And each time I told myself, it's not that bad. He doesn't mean it. He loves me. Until last Saturday. Until the joke that wasn't a joke. Until the silence that followed. Until Karen raised her hand and said she'd take me. And for the first time, I saw Mark panic. Not because he'd hurt me, but because someone else had called his bluff. That was when I knew the conflict hadn't started that day. That barbecue wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time everything he'd been planting finally broke the surface. The moment didn't explode, it pressed. That's the best way I can describe it. Like the air itself thickened after Mark's words landed. The grill hissed, a bottle clinked against glass somewhere behind me. Someone coughed, but no one laughed. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I turned slowly, spatula still in my hand, grease cooling where it dripped onto the metal tray. Mark stood near the patio table, wine glass raised, cheeks flushed, wearing that careless grin he always got when he thought he'd said something clever. Low maintenance, he'd said. Zero ambition. Not we, not our life. Me. Across the yard, Aaron, the recently divorced neighbor from 3 houses down, stepped forward. Aaron was quiet most of the time, polite, observant, the kind of man people underestimated because he didn't perform for attention. I'd noticed him before, in passing, the way you notice someone who actually listens when others talk. He smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly, but with a calm confidence that immediately shifted the balance of the moment. "I'll take her," he said lightly. "When should I pick her up?" The silence deepened. Mark's grin froze. That smug certainty drained from his face as reality caught up with him. This wasn't going the way he'd imagined. He'd expected laughter, a chorus of agreement, maybe a few playful comments at my expense. He hadn't expected someone to answer him. I felt something snap inside my chest. Not anger at first, but clarity. I set the spatula down, carefully. Every step toward them felt heavier than the last, like my body understood before my mind did that something irreversible was happening. "Well," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, "I really appreciate you marketing me like this." A few people shifted uncomfortably. I turned my head slightly toward Mark. "Should I start packing now?" I continued, "or do you want to help load the truck?" Mark's face went pale. "Emily," he stammered, lowering his glass. "It was just a joke." I crossed my arms. "Was it?" I asked quietly. "Because Aaron here seems pretty serious." Aaron didn't back away. If anything, he stepped closer. Not toward me, but toward the truth of the moment. "Low maintenance sounds great," he said calmly. "And ambition's overrated. I prefer people who actually know how to enjoy their lives." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. I caught snippets of whispers, someone's sharp inhale, a wife tugging at her husband's sleeve. Mark laughed, too loudly. "Come on," he said, waving his hand. "Everyone knows I was kidding." I looked at him. "Do they?" I asked. "Because it sounded like you were trying to get rid of me. And now that someone's actually interested, you seem upset." His jaw tightened. He reached out and grabbed my arm, hard enough that I felt it immediately. "Can we talk privately?" he hissed through clenched teeth. I pulled my arm free, gently but firmly. "Why?" I asked. "You didn't mind discussing my shortcomings publicly a minute ago. What changed?" Aaron folded his arms, watching with open curiosity. Not gloating, not aggressive, just present. "The offer still stands," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Mark shot him a glare. "This is between me and my wife." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "You made it everyone's business when you tried to auction me off at a neighborhood barbecue." I gestured around us. "Aaron has just as much right to be part of this conversation as anyone else here." Mark's face flushed deep red. "Fine," he snapped. "We'll discuss this at home." I tilted my head. "Will we?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "What's left to discuss?" "You're being ridiculous," he said finally. "You know I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it then?" I asked. Aaron spoke up again, voice even. "I heard a man who doesn't appreciate what he has," he said. "And frankly, that's his loss." Mark snapped toward him. "Nobody asked you." I stepped between them slightly. "You literally asked everyone here," I said. "You asked who wanted to trade spouses. Now you're angry because someone took you up on the offer." The party was dead. No music, no laughter, just people standing in clusters pretending not to stare, while failing completely. Mark tried one last move, control through authority. "We're going inside," he said firmly. I raised an eyebrow. "Are we?" I asked. "Because I'm actually enjoying myself out here." Aaron smiled faintly. "Much better company than expected." Mark's voice dropped. "Choose," he said. "Them or me." I looked around, at the neighbors, at the faces full of curiosity and discomfort, then back at Mark. The man who had just spent 5 minutes explaining why I wasn't worth keeping. "That's an interesting ultimatum," I said calmly, "from someone who just publicly explained why I'm not worth choosing." His expression told me everything. He knew it. He'd pushed too far, and we both understood in that moment that whatever had existed between us before that sentence was already gone. The rest of the barbecue dissolved into awkward fragments. People lingered just long enough to pretend nothing had happened, then made excuses to leave. One couple remembered they had an early morning. Another suddenly needed to check on a babysitter. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. Laughter sounded forced, brittle. Mark barely spoke as the yard emptied. We cleaned up in silence, the kind that presses against your ears until it feels louder than shouting. I scraped plates into the trash. He stacked cups too hard, plastic cracking under his grip. I could feel his eyes on me, burning, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. That seemed to bother him more than anything else. When the last neighbor finally left and the gate clicked shut, he followed me inside. The door closed behind us with a dull thud. And then he exploded. "What the hell was that?" he shouted. I hung my keys by the door, slow and deliberate. "That," I said evenly, "was you learning what happens when you humiliate your wife in public." "It was a joke," he snapped. "You took it way too far." I turned to face him. "Was it funny?" I asked, because nobody laughed, except Aaron. His face twisted. "Don't bring up that divorced vulture," he snarled. He was just trying to cause problems. I let out a short laugh, sharp, humorless. "Problems?" I said. He was the only honest person there. Mark's voice rose. "You offered me up like a used car, and he said he'd take me. What's the problem?" His hands were shaking now. "The problem is you played along," he said. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stared at him. "I embarrassed you," I repeated slowly. "Let me get this straight. You tell a backyard full of people that your wife has no ambition and isn't worth keeping, but I embarrassed you?" He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. "You want to know what's actually embarrassing?" I continued. "Living with someone who thinks so little of me that he turns me into entertainment. Watching my husband drink too much and make me the punchline." "I was just being social," he said weakly. "You were being cruel," I replied. That landed. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "You can't be serious about this," he said. "Aaron is just desperate for attention." I watched him quietly. "And what are you?" I asked. He stopped. "What's that supposed to mean?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "Maybe look in the mirror before throwing stones," I said. "You think he's desperate? You're married to someone you clearly don't respect. What does that make you?" His face went pale. "That's different," he said. "We're married. We have a life." I shook my head. "Do we?" I asked. "Because we have a house and shared bills, but a partnership? I'm not seeing it." I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, my hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "You know what I realized today?" I said. "I've been making excuses for you for years, telling myself you were stressed or tired or joking." I turned to him. "But disrespect has become your normal." "I don't know what you're talking about," he said defensively. "Of course you don't," I replied. "You've been doing it so long, you think it is marriage." He laughed bitterly. "So what, you're running off with the neighbor now?" I met his eyes. "No," I said. "I'm done accepting disrespect from my husband." The room felt suddenly very small. No more jokes about my ambition. No more comments about my worth, especially not in public. "And if I don't agree?" he asked, voice tight. I held his gaze. "Then Aaron's offer is still on the table." The color drained from his face. "You wouldn't," he whispered. I didn't raise my voice. "Try me." We stood there, staring at each other, the weight of 8 years pressing down between us. "This is ridiculous," he said finally. "You're overreacting to one stupid joke." I took a step closer. "When was the last time you said something genuinely nice about me?" I asked. "When did you last build me up instead of tearing me down?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. My phone buzzed. I glanced down and froze, then felt a strange, unexpected smile pull at my mouth. A text from Aaron. "Hope you're okay after that. If you need to talk, I'm right next door." Mark noticed immediately. "Who was that?" he demanded. I turned the phone so he could see. "Aaron." His eyes went wild. "Delete it," he said. "Block his number. I don't want him contacting you." I looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm your husband," he shouted. I laughed softly, without warmth. "The same husband who tried to give me away 2 hours ago?" "That was different," he said desperately. "I was just talking." I shrugged. "And now Aaron's just talking. What's the difference?" "The difference is he's trying to steal my wife." I shook my head. You can't steal something being handed away for free. That truth hit him hard. He sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of his body. "This isn't how tonight was supposed to go," he muttered. "How was it supposed to go?" I asked. "You humiliate me, everyone laughs, we come home and pretend it never happened?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I turned toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed," I said. "We can continue this tomorrow, if there's anything left to say." "Where are you going?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. I paused at the bottom step. "The guest room," I said. "Good night." As I walked upstairs, I heard him start to cry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to turn around and comfort him. Something inside me had finally gone quiet, and I knew, whatever came next, I wasn't going back to who I'd been before. I woke up the next morning to the smell of bacon. For a split second, that soft, disorienting moment between sleep and awareness, I almost believed nothing had happened. That the night before had been a bad dream. That we were still the couple who shared lazy Sunday mornings and quiet routines. Then memory crashed back in. The silence. The words. The way Mark's voice had carried across the yard. I lay still in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening. Plates clinked softly. A pan sizzled. The radio played low in the kitchen. An old station Mark knew I liked. When I finally walked downstairs, I found him standing at the stove in his best apron. Hair neatly styled, freshly shaved. The full performance. "Good morning," he said brightly. "I made your favorite." I poured myself coffee and sat down. "What's the occasion?" I asked. He smiled. "Can't a husband make breakfast for his wife?" I took a slow sip. "This husband can," I said. "The question is whether he's doing it without an agenda." His smile faltered. Just for a second. "I thought the air feels pretty clear to me," I replied. He slid a plate in front of me. Bacon, eggs, toast. Perfectly arranged, like a peace offering. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I had too much wine. I said things I didn't mean." "Maybe," I agreed. He leaned forward eagerly. "Okay, I definitely said things I didn't mean. That's not who I really am." I cut into the eggs. "Actually," I said calmly, "I think yesterday was exactly who you are. It's just the first time you said it in front of witnesses." "That's not fair," he said quickly. I said, "When was the last time you bragged about me?" I asked. "When did you last tell someone you were lucky to be married to me?" He opened his mouth. Then, "I don't really think about things like that," he said. I nodded. "No, you don't, but you definitely think about all the ways I disappoint you." The doorbell rang. We both froze. Through the window, I saw Aaron standing on the porch, holding a coffee mug. Mark's body went rigid. "Don't answer it," he said immediately. I stood up. "Good morning, Aaron," I said, opening the door. He smiled. "Morning. Sorry to bother you. I ran out of sugar. Store doesn't open for another hour." "Of course," I said. "Come on in." Mark appeared behind me like a guard dog, wearing a strained smile. "Oh," he said tightly. "How unexpected." "Hope I'm not interrupting," Aaron said easily. "Not at all," I replied. "We were just having breakfast." I poured him coffee. Mark's smile cracked. "Actually, we were having a private conversation." I looked at him. "Were we?" Aaron glanced between us, amused but attentive. Did I miss something? Not really, I said. Mark was explaining how yesterday was a misunderstanding. Aaron chuckled softly. Oh, the barbecue thing? No misunderstanding on my end. I meant every word. Mark's hand slammed onto the counter. I think we've discussed yesterday enough. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Have we? Because I've been thinking about it all night. Mark's jaw tightened. About what? Aaron smiled calmly. The trade. The silence was deafening. That's not happening, Mark snapped. Why not? Aaron asked. Yesterday you made it sound like she was more trouble than she's worth. That was a joke, Mark said sharply. Aaron tilted his head. Was it funny? I couldn't help it. Those were my exact words from the night before. Aaron noticed my expression. That's what you asked him, right? He said. And what was the answer? I shrugged. He's still working on it. Mark slammed his palm down again. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Aaron nodded politely. You're right. That's rude. Mark was just explaining that he didn't mean what he said. Apparently, it was the wine talking. I added quietly, in vino veritas. Mark's face turned a deep, angry red. Are you two ganging up on me now? No, Aaron said. I'm just saying alcohol doesn't create thoughts. It removes filters. Mark exhaled sharply. Fine, he said. Maybe I think she could be more ambitious. Is that a crime? Aaron looked genuinely curious. More ambitious how? Mark gestured around the kitchen. More money, more success. Look around. Middle-class house, middle-class life. I felt it then, that sharp, unmistakable sting. You're embarrassed, I said quietly. That's not what I said, he argued. It's exactly what you said, I replied. You just used different words. Aaron watched him carefully. Can I ask you something? He said. Mark snapped. What? What do you contribute? Aaron asked calmly. Mark's mouth fell open. Excuse me? You criticize her ambition, Aaron continued. Her income, her drive. So what do you bring to the table? Mark sputtered. I'm the husband. That's a title, Aaron said, not a contribution. The room went silent. I take care of things, Mark said finally. Do you work? Aaron asked. I'm between jobs. I looked at him. 18 months, I said quietly. Aaron's eyebrows rose. 18 months, he repeated. And you're criticizing her ambition? That's different, Mark snapped. How? Aaron asked. Mark couldn't answer. I turned toward the window, watching neighbors go about their normal Sunday routines, mowing lawns, walking dogs, living their lives. You know what I realized last night? I said without turning around. I've been apologizing for who I am for years, making excuses for why I'm not rich enough, driven enough, impressive enough for you. That's not true, he protested. How many times have you told me to push harder? I asked. To chase something bigger. Silence. I like my life, I said. I like my job. I like having time to breathe. Aaron smiled. Sounds perfect to me. Mark snapped. Nobody asked you. I turned back. Actually, he did, yesterday, Aaron added lightly. And my answer hasn't changed. When do you want me to pick her up? Mark's face twisted with rage. Get out, he shouted at Aaron. Get out of my house. Your house? Aaron asked calmly. Funny. Given you haven't worked in 18 months, I'm guessing her name is on the mortgage. I didn't correct him because he was right. That realization hit Mark like a physical blow. That's enough, he screamed. I want him out, now. Why? I asked. He came to borrow sugar. We haven't even given him any yet. Aaron stood. Maybe I should go, he said politely. I shook my head. You're not making me uncomfortable. Stay. Mark stared at me like he'd never seen me before. And maybe he hadn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't protecting his ego. I was standing exactly where I belonged. Aaron eventually left. Not because Mark forced him out, but because the tension in the room had become unbearable. He stood, thanked me for the coffee with quiet sincerity, and gave Mark a look that wasn't smug or victorious. It was pity, and that was worse. The door closed behind him, and the house fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it might crack the walls. Mark turned on me the second Aaron was gone. You humiliated me, he said, voice shaking. You let him talk to me like that, in my own house. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let anything happen, I said. You said what you said. He just didn't pretend it was funny. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing. This is all his fault, he said. He put ideas in your head. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. No, I said softly. He just said out loud what I've been feeling for years. That's not fair, he snapped. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Everyone says marriage has rough patches. I looked at him. Can we? I asked. Because yesterday you made it clear I'm not worth the effort. I was drunk, he said quickly. And now you're sober, I replied. And you're still trying to control who I talk to, who I listen to, who I'm allowed to feel seen by. His voice cracked. I don't want to lose you. I believed him. And that scared me, because I realized something in that moment. He didn't want me. He wanted the version of me that made his life easier. The one who stayed quiet. The one who absorbed criticism. The one who made his dissatisfaction someone else's fault. I'm going upstairs, I said. He followed me to the bottom of the stairs. Don't do this, he pleaded. Please, we need to talk. We've been talking for years, I said. You just never listened. I closed the guest room door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, my body finally giving in to the weight of everything I'd been holding back. That's when it hit. Not anger. Grief. I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, but silently, my chest tight, my throat burning. I cried for the woman I'd been when I married him. The woman who believed love automatically meant respect. I cried for every time I'd laughed off a comment that hurt. For every dinner where I made excuses for him. For every moment I'd convinced myself I was asking for too much. Downstairs, I heard him moving around. Cabinets opening, a glass clinking, the muffled sound of the television turning on. Like noise could erase what had happened. It didn't. Hours passed. At some point, my phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just couldn't stay quiet after what I heard. You deserve better than that. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I wanted him, but because no one had ever said that to me so clearly before. You deserve better. I didn't reply. Not yet. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, feeling hollow. This was the lowest point, not because I was alone, but because I finally understood that the marriage I'd been trying to save had never been mutual. And that realization hurt more than any argument ever could. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't afraid of losing my husband. I was afraid of losing myself again if I stayed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room, listening to the house settle. Pipes ticking, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Mark pacing downstairs long after midnight. Every noise felt louder than it should have, like the house itself was paying attention. At some point, the anger drained out of me completely. What replaced it was clarity, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that comes with speeches or ultimatums. It was quieter than that, heavier. The kind of clarity that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I wasn't angry because Mark embarrassed me at a barbecue. I was angry because that moment had stripped away the last excuse I had left. The next morning, I came downstairs early. The house was still. Mark was asleep on the couch, fully dressed, one arm hanging off the side, a half-empty glass of water on the coffee table. For a second, I just stood there and looked at him. 8 years. This was the man I had defended, the man I had softened myself for, the man whose discomfort I had prioritized over my own dignity. And I felt nothing. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table alone, my phone face down beside the mug. I didn't pick it up right away. I didn't need to. The truth was already there. Around mid-morning, Mark woke up and shuffled into the kitchen, eyes red, movements slow. He looked like someone who expected forgiveness to be waiting for him. We should talk, he said quietly. I nodded. We should. He sat across from me, hands clasped like he was bracing himself. I've been thinking, he began, about everything you said, about how I made you feel. I waited. I don't want to be that guy, he said, the one who disrespects his wife. There it was. I don't want to be that guy, not I was wrong. not I hurt you, just discomfort with his reflection. I believe you, I said calmly. I believe you don't like how this makes you look. He flinched. That's not what I meant. Then tell me, I said, what do you actually respect about me? He opened his mouth, closed it. Tried again. You're dependable, he said. You keep things running. You're loyal. I nodded slowly. Those are things I do, I said. Try again. Who am I to you? His eyes searched my face, then dropped to the table. I don't know how to answer that, he admitted. And there it was, the thing I needed to hear, not because it hurt, but because it ended the argument before it could start again. I do, I said quietly. He looked up. I know exactly who I am, I continued. I'm someone who works hard, someone who values peace over appearances, someone who shows up even when she's being chipped away at. I took a breath. And I'm someone who is done begging to be seen. His voice cracked. So what are you saying? I stood up. I'm saying this marriage isn't broken, I said. It's finished. His face drained of color. You can't mean that. I do, I said. And I don't mean it impulsively. I mean it clearly. He stood too, panic rising. You're ending 8 years over one comment? I met his eyes. No. I'm ending it because that comment was honest. Because when someone finally took you at your word, you panicked. Not because you hurt me, but because you lost control of the narrative. He shook his head. This isn't you. I nodded once. You're right, I said. This is who I become when I stop shrinking. There was a knock at the door. We both froze. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I opened it. Aaron stood there, holding a small paper bag. I brought sugar, he said lightly. Figured I should replace what I borrowed. Thank you, I said. That's thoughtful. Mark appeared behind me, tense. Aaron noticed immediately. I can come back later, he said. No, I replied. You're fine. Mark exhaled sharply. This is inappropriate. I turned to him. What's inappropriate, I said, is pretending this marriage is salvageable because you're afraid of being alone. Aaron didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He was just standing there, calm, respectful, not asking for anything. And that's when it hit me. The turning point wasn't choosing Aaron. It was choosing myself. Mark, I said evenly, I want you to pack your things. The words landed like a physical blow. You're kicking me out? He whispered. This is my house, I said, and I need space. Immediately. He looked at Aaron like this was his doing. This is because of him. I shook my head. No, he didn't put anything in my head. He just refused to pretend I was disposable. Mark's shoulders sagged. Where am I supposed to go? I held his gaze. That's something you'll have to figure out. The same way I've been figuring things out alone for years. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes that had nothing to do with anger. And I felt steady. Not cruel, not vengeful, just done. Mark didn't argue at first. That was the strangest part. He stood there in the middle of the kitchen, shoulders slumped, eyes unfocused, like someone who just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. The confidence he usually relied on, the sarcasm, the irritation, the moral high ground, none of it worked now. Just give me some time, he said finally. We can cool off, think. I shook my head. That's what I've been doing for years, I said. Cooling off, thinking, waiting for you to notice. Aaron shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable, but still silent. He wasn't here to fight my battles. That mattered. Mark looked at him again, resentment flashing. You're really okay with this? He asked me. Throwing everything away? I met his eyes. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm returning something that was never appreciated. He laughed bitterly. You think he's better than me? I didn't hesitate. I think he sees me, I said. And you stopped trying to a long time ago. That broke something in him. He turned away sharply, dragging a hand down his face, then headed upstairs. I heard drawers opening, closet doors slamming, the sound of zippers being yanked too hard. Aaron finally spoke, quietly. If you want me to go... No, I said gently. Stay, please. He nodded, understanding more than he said. Mark came back down with a duffel bag and a suitcase. His movements were jerky, angry, but underneath that anger was panic, the kind that comes when consequences stop being theoretical. "This isn't fair," he said. "You didn't even give me a chance to fix it." "I gave you 8 years," I replied. "You just didn't think you needed to change." He scoffed. "So that's it? You kick me out and suddenly everyone thinks I'm the bad guy?" I crossed my arms. "You made yourself the bad guy when you humiliated your wife and doubled down on it." He opened his mouth to argue. I didn't let him. "You didn't lose me because of Aaron," I said. "You lost me because you didn't like me. You tolerated me." Silence filled the room again. He grabbed his keys. "Your parents are going to hear about this," he snapped. "The neighbors, too." I nodded. "They already have," I said. "You made sure of that on Saturday." He hesitated at the door. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. I met his gaze without flinching. "The only thing I regret," I replied, "is staying quiet for so long." He left. The door closed behind him with a finality that felt heavier than any slam. Outside, his car started, then disappeared down the street. Aaron exhaled slowly. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than I expected." And I meant it. The fallout didn't come all at once. It trickled. By Monday, people were whispering. By Wednesday, the story had a dozen versions. Some neighbors avoided eye contact. Others smiled at me with something like respect. A few reached out quietly. Texts, quick conversations by the mailbox. "I'm sorry you went through that. You didn't deserve what he said. I always wondered why he talked to you like that." Mark's parents called. I didn't answer. He came by once, unannounced, demanding to talk things through. I didn't open the door. A week later, I heard through someone else that he was staying with a friend and reconsidering his priorities, that he was angry, that he felt blindsided. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to, because something else was happening at the same time. I was sleeping better, breathing easier, laughing, actually laughing for the first time in years. Aaron didn't move in. He didn't rush anything. He didn't even bring it up. We talked. We cooked together once or twice, sat on the porch in the evenings, sharing space without pressure. And people noticed. "You look lighter," one neighbor said. I was. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't. His easy charm didn't land the same anymore. His jokes felt sharp instead of clever. The story he'd told himself, that I was the problem, that I was holding him back, didn't hold up once I was gone, because I hadn't collapsed. I hadn't begged. I'd walked away calmly. And nothing unnerves the wrong person more than realizing you were never the fragile one in the relationship. 3 weeks later, I was back at the grill. Same backyard. Same late afternoon sun slanting through the trees. Same familiar smell of charcoal and smoke curling into the air. But everything else felt different. This time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't scanning faces, bracing myself for comments, waiting to be diminished. I was just there. Aaron stood beside me, calmly tossing salad into a bowl, completely at ease. No tension, no walking on eggshells. Just two people sharing space without needing to prove anything. "So," he said, glancing over with a faint smile, "how's the neighborhood rumor mill treating you?" I chuckled. "Mixed reviews. Half the wives think I'm some kind of hero. The rest think I'm dramatic." "And the husbands?" I smiled to myself. "They've been giving me those knowing looks. A few even asked for advice." Aaron laughed softly. "I'm not surprised." Mark stopped by twice in those 3 weeks. Once to collect the last of his things. Once to ask for another chance. Both times I stayed calm, firm, kind, but unmovable. The divorce paperwork was already in motion. "Any second thoughts?" Aaron asked gently. I shook my head. "Only that I waited too long." He reached over and kissed my cheek. Light, respectful, unclaimed. "I'm not complaining about your timing," he said. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mark. He looked diminished, unshaven, tired, like someone who hadn't quite accepted that life had moved forward without him. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "I got a job," he said quickly. "I start Monday." "That's good," I said. "You should have done that a year and a half ago." "Please," he said, "can we talk? without him here. Aaron quietly stepped into the kitchen, giving us space. There's nothing left to talk about, I said. It was just a joke at a barbecue, he insisted. You're ending our marriage over that? It wasn't one joke, I replied. It was 8 years of disrespect. That barbecue was just the moment you said it out loud. I'll change, he said desperately. I'll do anything. I looked at him steadily. Tell me one thing you love about me, I said. One thing that has nothing to do with what I provide. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Silence answered for him. That's what I thought, I said gently. Take care of yourself. As I closed the door, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. Aaron met me in the kitchen. You okay? He asked. I nodded. For the first time in years. Later that evening, we sat on the porch watching the sky fade into pink and gold. You know what the strangest part is? I said. What? The worst moment of my marriage ended up being the moment that set me free. Aaron smiled. Sometimes people show you who they are by accident, he said. And that's the most honest version. I leaned back, feeling the quiet settle around us. I hadn't taken the easy road, but I had taken the right one. And for the first time in 8 years, I was with someone, and more importantly, with myself, in a way that felt whole. If someone jokes about losing you, believe them. If they belittle you publicly, they'll erode you privately. And if you're the only one fighting for respect, you're not in a partnership, you're in a performance. The moment you stop shrinking is the moment everything changes. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's finally choosing yourself.